My father used to say, "I love fishing. You put that line in the water, and you don't know what's on the other end. Your imagination is under there." I'm pretty sure he stole that from some much smarter person. But as much as he loved that quote, he couldn't imagine how right he was. As you have probably guessed, my father was a fisherman. He and his friends would leave on a fishing trip to some ever-changing location whenever he could. When his friends couldn't come, he would go by himself because any time spent not fishing is wasted time, according to him at least. After I was born, he often took me with him, even as a baby. My mother told me he brought me before I could even stand on my own. He was a proud fisherman and really wanted me to be the same when I grew up. At first, my mother would accompany us, watching over me while my father fished away the hours. But once my brother and sister were born, she had to stay at home to take care of them. Apparently, my dad considered it an occasion for some father and son bonding. I was only 5 years old and already idolized my dad all the time, so I didn't really get his need for it. Perhaps he was old school and unable to just say he was happy to spend time with me or something. Sadly, I will never be able to ask him the truth. You see, my father died when I was 6 years old. Actually, that's not really true. The thing is, I killed my father. Let me explain. It all happened so long ago, but my memories of those events are crystal clear. So, here's the story of the last fishing trip I have ever done. On March 9th, 2000, my father and I embarked on an ice fishing trip in the north of Quebec. With its many bodies of water, it was ideal for fishermen like my dad. He had spent a lot of time in the area and knew everything about it in the summer. But it was the first time he went there for ice fishing. I remember how excited he was during the long drive there. He kept his eyes on the road with a giant smile plastered on. Sometimes he giggled to himself, probably already fishing in his mind. All I could do was stare at him and laugh and smile too. We arrived at the site at sundown. My father started setting the tent up while I took a stroll near the frozen lake not far from there. It was beautiful, a sight that city folks could never dream of. The sky was a work of art that I was unable to appreciate in its entirety at such a young age, but still remarkable enough to make an impression that would stay in my mind forever. It also is the moment things went downhill. I heard some tapping near me. At first, I didn't pay any attention to it, thinking it sounded like my dad working on the tent. Hearing it again, I came to realize that the sound was not coming from the campsite's direction. It came from the lake. The last tapping scared me, and I ran back to my father, telling him about the tapping from the lake. He burst into his characteristic big laughter. It's probably just some critters running around, or it might be all the fishes that can't wait to be fished tomorrow. I remember all my fear just disappearing. Nothing wrong could happen to us because my dad was there. He was so tall and strong. If he wasn't nervous or scared, I had no reason to be. With that, we spent some time around the fire before heading to bed. According to my father, before sunrise was supposedly the best time for ice fishing. So of course, We woke up with the light from dawn still hidden behind the canopy on the horizon. We came out of the tent, ready to grab the equipment and catch all the fish we could, only to find our campsite filled with snow prints, like something had walked around us many times during the night. We both observed the prints with curiosity. They looked like colossal duck prints, the size of an adult foot. I asked my father if ducks could get so big, and, with an inconfident nod from his part, we waved this odd occurrence and resumed our fishing activities. I watched my dad drill the ice at regular intervals for our many fishing spots and helped him set things up as much as a 6-year-old could, which means not a lot. At least, in my childish mind, I was an integral part of our future fishing success. The hours passed, and the sun finally reached the sky above us, and the fishes came aplenty on our lines. Any fisherman will tell you that patience is fundamental to this hobby. If it had also been so important in my mind at the time, my father would still be with us. You see, after so many hours watching the line and chit-chatting with my dad, I became restless. I needed to move more than what was required of me. "Dad, can I go walk a bit?" "Sure, champ. Just don't go too far, okay? I want you to stay in my sight at all times, got it?" I nodded while jumping up on my feet as my exploration of the area began. I was about 50 meters away from my father when last night's stabbing resumed nearby. I looked around, trying to find its source. There was no sign of any living things above the ice anywhere in sight, so whatever was stabbing the ice must have been under it. I got on my knees and started pushing the snow away to clean the ice. I couldn't see anything under the ice at all, even when it was clean. I decided to put my face on it and use my hands as blinders. That allowed me to see something that I shouldn't have seen. A person's face appeared in front of me, making me scream and fall on my back. I looked back to see my father looking at me briefly and going back to his fishing line. I didn't want to bother him, so I decided against telling him what I saw. Looking back under the ice, the face was still there, staring at me. It looked like a beautiful woman smiling at me from underwater. I should have been scared and ran back to my father. Instead, I was confident that I had met a real-life mermaid, like Ariel from the movie. I cleared more snow to better view this mythical creature I just found. She had a gray complexion, long black hair, and a brown dress. She waved at me with her palmed hand, and I waved back, thinking about how different she was from Ariel. But still, she must be nice if she's a mermaid. She tapped on the ice and beckoned me to follow her, swimming away and knocking again so that I could follow her. Oblivious to the danger of the situation, I followed her continuously further away from my father. I knew I was disobeying my father's request, but he would probably forgive me eventually. It was a game to me, and I was having fun with my newfound friend. I have no idea how long I followed her, but the chase ended when she led me to a big hole in the ice. I was running toward the spot when I saw one of her slimy hands reach out and fall on the ice with a heavy thud. I stopped in my track as she pulled herself from the water and on the ice. I stood there frozen in uncertainty. She did not have a fishtail, so she wasn't a mermaid. Well, what was she then? Before I could blur out a question, her comforting smile contorted and became nothing less than devious. The next instant, she ran in my direction, her hand reaching out to me. I started running back where I came from, screaming for my father to come to save me. The pursuit lasted mere seconds. She was even taller than my dad. One step of her palmed feet was numerous of my small children's steps. She grabbed me by my hair and lifted my whole body with just one hand. I flailed around as I passed over her head into a bag on her shoulders. The light of the sun disappeared as the opening was tied up. I was trapped. The bag was tight. I could barely move at all. I was forced into a fetal position, crying as despair took over me. I have no idea what exactly happened after that. I heard my father shouting and the creature hissing. There was a struggle that threw the bag on the ground. The chaos continued for a while. A huge splash, and then nothing but silence. After some time, I was able to loose the rope from the inside and freed myself out. Here I was, all alone in the wilderness. The white emptiness of the winter was only interrupted by my father's watery grave. I was able to find my way back to our campsite somehow. The tent, fire, and food my father had brought are the only reason I survived. I can say he saved my life twice that day. Before leaving for a trip, my parents would always inform each other exactly where we would be staying. My mother called for help when we did not return on time, and I was rescued the next day. All the adults didn't believe anything I recounted. All they would talk about were trauma and shock. With time, I even began to think that they might be right and that my mind could not grasp the reality of what really happened that day. Now, I know that I was right. My research leads me to believe my father is still alive as the creature feeds on him to keep her youth. I intend on rescuing him, no matter what it takes.